Fleeing outlaws, the cowboy hid in a widowed Apache woman's home. He woke to her on top of him. The morning sun had barely started to touch the horizon when Jack rode hard across the dry plains. Dust rose in clouds around the hooves of his weary horse, and the wind carried the sharp scent of sagebrush and hot dirt. He had been running all night, and every muscle in his body ached. Behind him, the shouts of men and the crack of gunfire reminded him that the gang of outlaws he had crossed the night before was still on his trail. Each shout sent a chill down his spine. He had made mistakes, and now he was paying for them. Jack wasn't a bad man. Not truly. He had grown up on the frontier, learned to ride before he could walk, and worked hard for everything he owned. But sometimes desperation led a man to make choices he would regret. The robbery hadn't been his idea, but when he had tried to refuse, the others had threatened him. Now he was alone, his heart hammering as he thought about the consequences if he was caught. The landscape stretched endlessly around him. Rolling hills gave way to jagged cliffs, and the plains seemed to shimmer in the heat. Jack's horse, a sturdy bay mare named Daisy, stumbled once or twice over hidden rocks. Bess. Jack tightened his grip on the reins and whispered words of encouragement to her. She had been his companion through many difficult rides, and he trusted her instincts. She, too, seemed to understand the danger behind them. As they rode, Jack's mind raced. He thought about where he could hide, where he could find shelter. Towns were no longer safe. The outlaws had friends everywhere, and one look at him could bring trouble to anyone who tried to help. He needed a place far from prying eyes, somewhere isolated. Bay. Somewhere that might not even appear on a map. Then, in the distance, he saw it. A thin wisp of smoke curling into the sky. Bay. It was faint, but unmistakable. Someone had a fire. Maybe it was just a trap, but maybe it was also a chance. Jack slowed Daisy, trying to make sense of what he saw. The smoke came from a small grove of trees, and beneath them, he could just make out the shape of a cabin. His heart pounded. He hadn't dared hope for shelter in days. The thought of a roof over his head and a chance to rest made his legs tremble. Still, caution ruled him. He dismounted a short distance from the cabin, leading Daisy behind him. Every step felt dangerous. Every snap of a twig underfoot sounded like a shout. Jack's eyes scanned the trees, searching for movement, searching for any sign that he had been spotted. The cabin was small but sturdy. Its wooden walls were weathered, and the roof was patched in places, but it looked strong. A small garden sat to one side, overgrown with wildflowers and herbs. Jack could tell someone cared for this place, someone who had lived here quietly for a long time. There was no sound of children, no clanging of tools, only the soft crackle of smoke from the chimney. Jack took a deep breath and stepped closer. He raised a hand to knock but hesitated. He had no idea who lived here. It could be a family, a farmer with a rifle, or worse, someone who would turn him in immediately to the outlaws. But he had no choice. He could not run forever, and he could not keep hiding in the open. Before he could make a final decision, the cabin door opened. A woman stepped out, tall and strong, with dark hair pulled back from her face. Her eyes were sharp, cautious, and curious all at once. She carried herself with a confidence that made Jack feel small in comparison. He noticed the lines of hard work around her eyes and the calm way she held herself. This was no ordinary woman. This was someone who had survived much in life. Jack raised his hands slowly. "Please, I mean no harm," he said, his voice rough from exhaustion. I'm being chased. I need shelter for a little while." The woman studied him, her eyes narrowing. She did not speak immediately. Jack could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she were reading his very thoughts. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of pine and dry earth. Daisy shifted nervously behind him. Bow. Finally, the woman spoke, her voice firm but not unkind. "You're a long way from anywhere," she said. "And trouble seems to follow you." "Yes," Jack admitted, lowering his gaze. I've made mistakes. I'm not proud of them. But I need a place to rest, just for the night. I won't cause trouble. I swear it." The woman hesitated. Jack could see her thinking, weighing the risks of letting a stranger into her home. He could tell she was strong, independent, someone who had learned to survive on her own. And yet, there was a softness to her expression, a hint that compassion was still alive despite the hard life she had clearly endured. "Come inside," she finally said. "But stay out of my way and don't touch anything you shouldn't." Relief flooded through Jack, and he nodded quickly. "Thank you. I won't cause any trouble." The woman stepped aside, and Jack led Daisy to the side of the cabin where she could be tied safely. Then he followed the woman inside. The cabin was small but well kept, with simple furniture and the faint smell of herbs and wood smoke. A fire burned in the hearth, casting a warm glow that made the cold from the plains seem distant. Jack sank onto a chair, too exhausted to speak. The woman moved around the cabin quietly, preparing something for breakfast. She didn't ask questions yet, didn't demand explanations. Jack watched her, noticing the strength in her movements, the careful way she handled each task. He realized that survival in this world was not just about courage, it was about patience, skill, and knowing when to trust. As the storm clouds gathered in the distance, Jack felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. The outlaws could still be out there, somewhere, hunting him like a predator. But for now, he was safe. And for the first time in days, he could breathe. He could rest. The woman brought him a bowl of stew, simple but nourishing. Bess. Jack ate quietly, grateful but also careful not to overstep his welcome. He wanted to earn her trust, even in small ways, and he knew that one wrong word or gesture could ruin everything. While he ate, he tried to gather his thoughts. How had he gotten here? How had life led him to this moment, sitting in a cabin on the edge of the plains, with a woman he barely knew offering him shelter? He thought of the outlaws chasing him, of the mistakes that had led him here, and he realized that he had little control over the world, only over his own actions and choices. After breakfast, he sat near the fire, letting the warmth seep into his tired body. Bowed outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the distant sounds of the plains. Jack knew that he could not stay here forever. The outlaws would not give up easily, but for now, he had a safe place, and that was more than he had hoped for in a long time. He glanced at the woman who was now sitting across from him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There was a quiet understanding between them, unspoken but present. They were two survivors in a harsh world, each with their own past, each with their own fears. And for now, they shared a moment of peace in the midst of chaos. As the day wore on, Jack realized that survival was not just about running or hiding. It was about trust, about recognizing when someone else might offer help, even when it seemed impossible. He had made mistakes, yes, but he also knew that he could still choose the right path, even if it was only for one day, even if it was only for a single act of gratitude towards someone who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. Evening came and the cabin grew quiet. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Jack could hear Daisy breathing outside, her hooves shifting in the dirt as she slept. He felt a strange sense of calm, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he could survive this ordeal and find a way to make amends for his mistakes. As he settled down to sleep, he knew one thing for certain. The plains were vast and unforgiving, and the world was full of dangers. But in that small cabin, with the wind outside and the fire within, he had found a moment of safety, and that was worth more than gold, more than freedom, more than anything else he could imagine. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that this encounter, brief as it might be, would change him forever. Jack had slept more soundly than he had in days, though he woke several times to the wind rattling the cabin's walls and the occasional creak of the floorboards. The first light of dawn painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, and for a moment he simply lay on the rough wooden floor, letting the warmth of the fire fade into the sunlight. Basie, his loyal horse, nickered softly outside, reminding him that life and responsibilities were still waiting. He felt a strange mix of gratitude and unease. The woman who had given him shelter, Maya, as she had introduced herself quietly the night before, was still cautious around him. She hadn't asked many questions, but the silence carried weight. Jack realized that trust was not something she would give easily, and rightly so. Anyone could have tried to deceive her. He knew he had to prove himself, at least in small ways, if he was to stay safe under her roof. "Morning," he said quietly, hoping to sound polite without overstepping.
Maya glanced up from where she was tending a small hearth.
"Morning," she replied simply, her tone neutral but not unfriendly. She carried a quiet strength that made her presence commanding, even without words. She was already preparing breakfast, and Jack noticed the precise way she handled each utensil, the care she took with each movement. There was pride in how she lived, a dignity that no hardship had managed to erase. But Jack offered to help, though he wasn't sure what he could do. Maya hesitated for a moment, but finally handed him a bundle of kindling for the fire. Best. He knelt on the floor, feeling the warmth of the embers against his hands as he added the sticks carefully. It was a simple task, but the act felt meaningful. He was participating in something ordinary, yet extraordinary in its normalcy. For the first time in weeks, he felt a small measure of peace. As the fire crackled, Jack took a moment to study Maya. She was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back into a practical braid, her skin weathered but healthy from years under the sun. Her eyes were deep and watchful, moving over everything with quiet alertness. Jack sensed she had endured hardships beyond what most could imagine. Losses, isolation, and the weight of survival in a harsh land. Yet there was resilience in her, a spark that had not been dimmed.
"Do you ride?" she asked suddenly, without looking up.
Yes, Jack replied. Always have. It's what keeps me alive sometimes. Maya's eyes met his for a brief moment, as if assessing the truth in his words. Then she returned to her work. Good, Becked. You'll need that. Jack understood what she meant. The plains were not forgiving, and even a few hours of rest did not guarantee safety. The outlaws were still out there, and every mile he had traveled to reach this cabin had been perilous. Yet he felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that Maya was willing to help, even if only temporarily. Breakfast was simple. Dried meat, cornmeal, and water warmed over the fire. Jack ate slowly, savoring the food in a way he hadn't been able to for days. His body was exhausted, and yet the nourishment seemed to restore more than just his physical strength. It gave him a sense of stability, a momentary reprieve from the chaos chasing him across the plains. Maya watched him eat, occasionally glancing at the fire, as if considering what to say next. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken questions. Who was he? But what had he done to be hunted? Could she trust him, or was he a danger? Jack felt the weight of her gaze, but also understood it. Trust had to be earned, and he had no right to demand it. After breakfast, he offered to clean up, and Maya handed him a rag. As he worked, he noticed the small details of her life. A few handmade baskets, tools hung neatly on the walls, herbs drying from the rafters. Each item spoke of someone who had adapted to the world around her, someone who knew how to survive alone. He realized that the cabin was more than just a shelter. It was a reflection of her life, her choices, and her independence. "I live alone," Maya said after a while, her voice breaking the silence. "Since my husband died." "Bad. It's easier this way. Safer this way."
Jack nodded slowly, understanding without pressing for details. "I'm sorry," he said softly.
"I didn't mean to intrude on your life. I just needed a place to hide, even for a short while." Bess, Maya gave him a brief, almost imperceptible nod. "You're welcome to stay." "For now. But the outlaws are not far. You'll need to move before they catch up." Beck, he knew she was right. The safety of the cabin was temporary, but it gave him something invaluable. Time to rest, recover, and plan his next move. "I'll leave before they find me," he promised. "I won't stay longer than necessary." Jack repaired a small section of the fence outside the cabin while Maya tended to her garden. The work was mundane, but it created a strange bond between them. Jack realized that this was the first time in days he had felt like more than just a hunted man. Here, he was useful. Here, he was human again, rather than prey. As the day wore on, the wind picked up, carrying the dry scent of the plains and distant thunderclouds. Jack knew a storm was approaching. He looked up at the sky, his mind racing. "Bez, we should prepare," he suggested. Maya nodded, already gathering supplies. "We don't know how bad it will get, but it's best to be ready." Together they reinforced the cabin door and windows, moved extra firewood closer to the hearth, and secured Daisy outside under the shelter of a small lean-to. It was hard work, but it gave Jack a sense of purpose. Every action felt necessary, every movement deliberate. He began to see Maya not just as a protector, but as a teacher in the ways of survival. Someone who understood the land and its dangers better than anyone he had ever met. As the storm clouds darkened the sky, they returned to the cabin. Rain began to fall in sheets, drumming against the roof and soaking the earth outside. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the cabin's walls. Jack watched the storm with a mixture of awe and unease. The plains were beautiful in their danger, vast and untamed, but they could also be merciless. He felt a shiver run through him, not from cold, but from the awareness of how small and fragile life could be. Maya tended the fire, making sure it stayed alive despite the wind and rain. Jack sat nearby, letting the warmth seep into his tired body. The cabin felt safe, almost like a small island in the middle of a chaotic world. Yet he knew the outlaws were still out there, and that knowledge kept him alert. They spoke in quiet tones, sharing stories about their lives. Jack talked about the mistakes that had led him here, careful not to reveal too much, but honest enough to show his remorse. Maya listened, occasionally nodding, sometimes offering a small comment or question. She told him about her life since her husband's death, about the challenges of living alone in the wilderness, and about the skills that had kept her alive. But through their conversation, Jack began to understand her in a deeper way. She was strong, independent, and wise. Yet, beneath that strength was a layer of vulnerability, a reminder that even the toughest people carried scars. He felt respect growing for her, and a quiet gratitude for the kindness she had shown him. Night fell, and the storm raged outside. Jack settled near the fire, wrapped in a blanket Maya had provided. Basie rested outside, safe under the lean-to. Jack's thoughts wandered, not to the outlaws or the mistakes he had made, but to the human connection he had found in this isolated cabin. For the first time in days, he felt something like hope. Maya moved quietly around the cabin, checking the fire and the windows. Jack could see her silhouette in the flickering light, and he felt a mixture of admiration and cautious curiosity.
He understood that she was protective, not just of her home, but of herself and everything she cared about.
He also realized that he had to respect her boundaries, no matter how grateful he felt. As the storm continued through the night, Jack drifted into a fitful sleep. The sound of rain and wind was soothing, yet kept him aware of the world outside. He dreamed of the plains, of the chase, of the vast skies and endless possibilities. And in that dream he saw a small cabin surrounded by trees, a fire burning inside, and a woman who had offered him something rare and precious: safety, understanding, and a chance to start over, if only for a short while. When he awoke, the storm had passed, leaving behind the scent of wet earth and fresh air. The sun shone weakly through the clouds, and the plains stretched out in all directions, beautiful and dangerous as ever. Jack knew that he could not stay much longer. The outlaws would not give up, and he needed to move before they found him. Yet he also knew something else, that this encounter, brief as it had been, had changed him. He had found trust, respect, and human kindness in the middle of a harsh world. He had learned from Maya not just about survival, but about courage, patience, and the quiet strength that allowed people to endure. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. He knew the journey ahead would be dangerous, but he felt stronger, more prepared, and as he looked at Maya tending to her cabin with quiet determination, he felt a sense of gratitude that words could not fully express. The plains awaited him, wild and unforgiving, but Jack had learned that even in the harshest conditions, humanity could shine through. In small acts of kindness, in moments of trust, and in the courage to protect and help others, even when the world seemed determined to break you. The sun was barely over the horizon when Jack woke. The warmth of the fire long faded, leaving only the soft gray light of morning spilling through the cabin window. Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, a tapestry of green and gold glistening under the early dew. The storm from the night before had left the air crisp and clean, the scent of wet earth and sage filling his lungs. Daisy stood nearby, nibbling on a small patch of grass that had survived the rain, her coat still damp but glistening in the morning light. Jack stretched his sore muscles and tried to shake off the lingering tension in his body. Even though the storm had passed, the memory of it, the roaring wind, the relentless rain, the fear of being caught, still clung to him. More pressing, however, was the realization that the outlaws could be closing in at any moment. He couldn't linger for long, yet something in him hesitated. He had spent 2 nights under Maya's roof, and in that short time he had come to respect her strength, her skill, and her careful way of seeing the world. Maya was already awake when he opened his eyes fully. She moved silently across the cabin, her steps light on the wooden floor. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders as she bent to tend the fire, and Jack noticed how natural and precise her movements were. the way she had mastered the small rituals of life that kept her safe and alive in the harsh wilderness. She glanced up and gave him a small nod, a greeting, but also a reminder of the boundaries that still existed between them. "Morning," Jack said softly, his voice rough from sleep. "Morning, Maya," replied without looking up from the fire. Her eyes flicked toward him briefly, assessing, weighing, then returned to her task. She carried herself with the calm confidence of someone used to being alone, someone who had learned to survive on her own terms. Jack pulled on his coat and sat near the hearth, trying to quiet his racing thoughts. The night had been long, filled with uneasy sleep and half-dreams of the outlaws closing in. Yet sitting here in the cabin with the faint smell of smoke and wet earth, he felt a fragile sense of safety. Bah. He also felt something else, a growing curiosity about Maya, about how she had managed to live alone in the wilderness, and what had made her the strong, independent person she was today.
"Did the storm wake you often?" Jack asked, breaking the silence.
Maya shook her head. "I'm used to it," she said simply. "The plains teach you to endure." She added no more, but Jack understood the depth behind her words. Surviving here meant more than fighting the elements. It meant knowing when to act, when to wait, and how to remain calm even when danger was close. They shared a quiet breakfast, simple and nourishing, each bite accompanied by the occasional glance at the other. Jack noticed that Maya spoke very little about herself, yet every small action, how she tended the fire, how she arranged the food, how she moved through the cabin, told him everything he needed to know about her life. She was resilient, careful, skilled, and independent. Bare. She had survived great loss, yet she still showed compassion, even to a stranger like him. After breakfast, the conversation turned to survival. Jack asked questions about how Maya grew her food, protected herself, and maintained the cabin. She answered with patience, showing him techniques he had never thought about, like how to store water safely, how to hide tracks from anyone pursuing him, and how to read the weather from subtle signs in the land. Jack listened intently, realizing that these were not just skills but lessons in life. Maya's instructions were more than practical advice. They carried wisdom, caution, and a sense of respect for the world around her. He found himself admiring her not only for her survival skills but for her insight, her clarity, and the quiet confidence that radiated from her. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. Jack and Maya worked together, reinforcing the cabin's defenses and checking the surrounding area. They moved with a silent rhythm, each understanding the other's needs without much speech. Jack began to see Maya not just as a protector, but as a teacher, guiding him through the harsh realities of life on the plains. As the day grew hotter, a distant noise caught Jack's attention, the faint sound of hooves on the dry earth. He froze, listening intently. Maya noticed his tension immediately, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the horizon.
"Relax," she said quietly, though her gaze remained sharp.
"It's probably just the wind, or maybe a stray animal. The plains make sounds all the time." Jack nodded, though the tension didn't fully leave him. Brace. He had learned to trust her judgment, yet the fear of the outlaws was always there, a shadow over every peaceful moment. The afternoon passed in careful routine. Jack repaired part of the fence while Maya tended her small garden. Each action was deliberate, each movement careful. They spoke sparingly, but the quiet conversation that existed between them felt more meaningful than words. Jack realized that in this isolation, trust was built slowly, in small acts of cooperation, in shared work, in understanding the rhythms of life around them. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, Jack felt a strange sense of connection to Maya. Not romance, not desire, at least not yet, but a recognition of shared humanity. They were two people, survivors in a harsh world, learning to rely on each other in a fragile moment of safety. The night fell gently, with a cool breeze whispering through the trees. The fire in the hearth burned low, casting soft, flickering shadows across the walls. Jack settled near the fire, feeling the exhaustion of the day weigh on him, but also a sense of calm. He knew the outlaws were still out there, but for now, he was safe. Maya moved around the cabin quietly, her presence both comforting and commanding. Jack watched her from the corner of his eye, noticing the care she took in checking the windows and tending the fire. He realized that she had done this countless times, not just for survival, but because she understood the importance of vigilance, of protecting what mattered most. At one point, Jack drifted into a light sleep, the warmth of the fire and the quiet rhythm of the cabin lulling him into dreams.
He woke suddenly, the cabin dimly lit by the dying embers of the fire.
Maya was near him, her expression serious, but not threatening.
"You need rest," she said softly.
"You've been running too long without sleep. If you want to survive, you must take care of yourself." Breath. Jack felt a mixture of gratitude and humility. Here was someone who had no obligation to help him, yet she had done so freely, guiding him through safety and survival. He nodded, too tired for words, and let himself lean back, trusting her judgment. The night passed slowly, filled with the quiet sounds of the plains outside, the distant cry of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the soft breathing of Daisy Tide. Jack thought about the journey ahead, about the outlaws still pursuing him, and about the rare moment of peace he had found here. For the first time, he felt that survival was not just about running, but about understanding and trusting others. Birth. Morning came again, soft and golden. Jack rose with the light, feeling stronger than he had in days. Maya was already awake, moving with quiet precision as she prepared the cabin for another day. Jack helped where he could, reinforcing the sense of cooperation and trust that had begun to form between them. Over breakfast, they spoke more freely, sharing small stories about their lives. Jack talked about the mistakes that had brought him here, careful not to dwell too much on guilt, but honest enough to show his remorse. Maya spoke of her husband, of the lessons she had learned in the wilderness, and of the strength it took to survive alone. Through these conversations, Jack realized that survival was more than escaping danger. It was about learning from others, about understanding the world, and about building bonds that could carry one through the harshest of times. As the day wore on, Jack began to prepare to leave. The outlaws could return at any moment, and he knew he could not stay indefinitely. Yet he felt a sense of loss at the thought of leaving. Not because of Maya personally, but because of the safety and understanding he had found in her home. Before he mounted Daisy, he turned to her.
"Thank you," he said simply, "for everything."
I won't forget this." Maya nodded, her expression calm but carrying a weight of understanding. "Survive," she said. "And remember what you've learned here. Trust is rare. Kindness is rare. Don't forget that. Despair." Jack felt the truth in her words. He had been running, hiding, and fighting for his life, but in this brief encounter he had found something far more valuable than safety alone. He had found guidance, wisdom, and the quiet strength of someone who had survived much and still chosen to help another. As he rode away, the cabin slowly disappearing behind the trees, Jack realized that this chapter of his journey had changed him. He was no longer just a hunted man. He was someone who had learned the value of trust, compassion, and quiet strength. And in the vast, untamed plains of the West, those lessons might very well be the difference between life and death. The morning air was crisp and sharp as Jack saddled Daisy, the mare twitching her ears at every sound from the plains. Dawn was breaking, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and gold, but Jack's heart was heavy with tension. The outlaws were still out there somewhere, and he knew their patience could not last forever. Every moment he lingered meant more danger for both him and Maya. Maya stood by the cabin, her expression calm but vigilant. She had already prepared food and water for the journey, knowing that Jack could not remain long. Her dark eyes scanned the horizon, reading the plains as if they told stories of movement and danger only she could interpret. Jack had learned much from her about survival, but even he could see that she understood the land in a way he never could. "Be careful," she said, her voice steady but carrying an unspoken weight. "They won't give up easily, and the plains are not forgiving. Remember what you learned here. Use your head, not just your speed." Jack nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. Her guidance had saved his life once, and now it could save him again. "I will," he promised. "Thank you for everything." She handed him a small bundle, extra food, a bit of dried meat, and some water. "Take this," she said. "You'll need it, and remember, don't leave tracks where you can't hide them." Jack mounted Daisy, the leather of the saddle creaking under him. He glanced back at Maya one last time, feeling a strange mixture of admiration, gratitude, and sadness. Their time together had been brief, but it had left a mark on him. She had shown him kindness when the world offered none, and had taught him lessons he would carry forever. The plains stretched endlessly before him, a mix of rolling hills, rocky outcrops, and sparse trees. Jack guided Daisy carefully, watching the ground for signs of danger and thinking about Maya's instructions. He would need to be clever, cautious, and quick if he was to escape the outlaws and survive. Hours passed as he rode, the sun climbing higher in the sky. He kept to the small valleys and hidden paths Maya had shown him, avoiding open plains where he would be easily spotted. The wind carried scents of the land, and Jack listened for any unusual sounds, snapping branches, distant voices, or the telltale sound of hooves. Suddenly, a movement caught his eye. Dust rose in the distance, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. The outlaws had found him, or at least they were close. He spurred Daisy forward, urging her to move faster but carefully, avoiding rocks and loose soil. Every second counted. The chase began in earnest. Jack felt the adrenaline surge through him, sharp and focused. The lessons Maya had taught him were now his lifeline. He led Daisy through narrow paths and hidden groves, using the terrain to his advantage. He could hear the outlaws shouting behind him, their voices angry and frustrated, but he refused to look back. At one point he reached a small creek. Remembering Maya's advice, he guided Daisy through the water, leaving only faint disturbances in the mud that would confuse anyone following. He carefully moved downstream before climbing back onto higher ground, hiding his tracks among rocks and shrubs. But it was slow and exhausting work, but Jack knew that cleverness would win the day, not just speed. Hours blurred into one another. Jack's muscles ached, his mouth was dry, and his heart raced with fear and determination. Yet he kept going, pushing Daisy forward while thinking about every piece of advice Maya had given him. Inspiration. She had taught him patience, observation, and the importance of understanding the land. Without her guidance, he would not have lasted this long. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jack spotted a ridge ahead. He slowed Daisy, assessing the terrain. Perhaps, from this height, he could see the plains stretching for miles, and the fading dust in the distance showed where the outlaws had last been spotted. He realized they were still pursuing him, but they were tired and less coordinated. The ridge offered a chance, a final push to throw them off his trail. He guided Daisy along a narrow path that wound up the ridge, careful to stay hidden from sight. At the top, he paused, scanning the plains below. The outlaws were scattered now, frustrated and losing hope. Jack felt a spark of hope. He could escape if he remained clever. If he remembered everything Maya had taught him. Base. Descending the other side of the ridge, Jack found a dense thicket of trees and shrubs. He led Daisy through it slowly, making as little noise as possible. The underbrush scratched at his legs and arms, but he welcomed the cover it provided. The outlaws were visible in the distance, their anger and confusion clear even from afar. Jack had succeeded in misleading them, at least for the moment. Night fell as Jack finally slowed Daisy, finding a small, hidden hollow among the trees. He let her rest while he ate some of the food Maya had packed. He thought about her, about the lessons she had given him, and about the kindness she had shown. The memory of her calm eyes and steady guidance filled him with determination. He would survive, and he would carry her lessons with him, forever. Sleep came slowly, but it was a deep, dreamless sleep, filled with exhaustion and relief. When Jack awoke the next morning, he was more alert, more focused. The plains were quiet now, with only the wind and the distant calls of birds. Daisy nickered softly, ready for the next stretch of the journey. Jack's resolve had strengthened. He would continue on the paths Maya had shown him, moving carefully, using the terrain to hide and protect himself. Days passed in this way. Jack traveled cautiously, using the hills, valleys, and forests to his advantage. He avoided towns and main trails, knowing that any contact could lead to danger. He relied on everything Maya had taught him: observation, patience, and clever thinking. But the outlaws' pursuit grew more distant with each day, and Jack could feel hope returning. Finally, after several tense days, Jack reached a small, isolated settlement far from the plains where the chase had begun. He entered cautiously, blending in with travelers and townsfolk. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly safe. He had survived not only the outlaws, but also the harsh land, and the lessons he had learned from Maya had guided him every step of the way. As he rested in the safety of the settlement, Jack reflected on his journey bare. He thought of the cabin, of Maya's quiet strength and skill, of the trust and guidance she had given him. Her kindness had saved his life, and the lessons she had taught him would carry forward. But he realized that survival was not just about running or hiding. It was about understanding others, learning from them, and valuing human connection even in the harshest circumstances. Jack knew he would never forget Maya. She had been more than a protector. She had been a teacher, a guide, and a reminder that courage and kindness could survive even in a dangerous world. And though he would continue his journey alone, the memory of the small cabin and the woman who had shown him trust and safety would remain with him always. The plains, wild and unforgiving, stretched endlessly before him, but Jack felt ready. He had faced danger, learned lessons in survival, and discovered the value of human connection. He mounted Daisy and rode out of the settlement, the horizon bright with possibility. Somewhere back in the hills, Maya continued her life, strong and independent as ever, unaware of just how much impact her small acts of kindness had made on a man's life. Jack thought of her often, knowing that the lessons she had given him would guide every decision he made. He rode on, not just as a man fleeing danger, but as a man changed by experience. Stronger, wiser, and full of gratitude for the kindness of someone who had trusted him when the world had offered nothing but peril. And as the sun rose higher, warming the plains and the journey ahead, Jack felt a quiet sense of hope. He had survived the chase. He had learned the value of trust, and he had discovered that even in a harsh, unforgiving world, human courage and compassion could shine brighter than any danger. The plains were vast, the journey uncertain, but Jack was ready. He carried with him the lessons of the cabin, the guidance of Maya, and the determination to survive. And with that he rode on, free, aware, and forever changed.